How do I know if owning an EV makes sense for me? With the expansion of my solar system, I have extra power most months of the year. Surely that's enough to justify owning an EV, right? You may have seen on a previous video, I even installed an EV charger. So my next two biggest questions are, 1, does it make financial sense to own one? And 2, what if my battery dies and I get stranded? What are my options? I want to understand my options ahead of time because a little bit of knowledge can make a huge difference in a survival situation. For instance, I discovered something as simple as this $10 device can mean the difference between inconvenience and being completely stranded. And I developed a simple calculator to help me, and now you, determine if an EV will save you money over a gas-powered car or not. Welcome back to Projects with Everyday Dave. It's time to answer some basics on owning an EV. Now, I won't mention any names to protect the innocent, but on more than one occasion, I've had somebody call me up and say, "Hey Dave, I've run out of gas. Can you come help me out?" Well, back in the old days, I could just run home, grab a gas can, stop at the gas station, put a couple gallons of fuel in it, and take it to the damsel in distress. Of course, if you have one of those newfangled capless fill lids, then you need an adapter for that, but that's not today's video. Today is about electric vehicles. What if I need to rescue someone who ran their electric vehicle out of power? Or what if I'm camping in a remote location and I'm not confident I'm going to be able to recharge my EV? I might be using the vehicle power for powering other things at the campsite and run the battery lower than expected. Then what can I do? I need to know how to be prepared for those kinds of situations. Originally I thought, that's not a huge deal. I'll just use a small portable generator like this one to charge it. And it might be slow, but it'll work in a pinch. And in fact, you can see people have tried this on YouTube with varying levels of success. But there's some things they leave out, and it's a good thing I tried this on my own because there's a few things you need to know in order to make sure that actually works. Make sure you watch the video to the end because if you leave any one of these things out, you will be stranded. Max Heating Rods offered to send me their new MXR 4000 inverter generator. It has 3,200 watts of running power and 4,000 watts of surge power. And it says right on the box, EV charging. Really? I thought, great, a perfect opportunity to test this for myself. Send it over, we'll give it a try. It takes very little research to realize the first thing you need to make this work is a ground-neutral bond plug. Many modern electronics, including EV chargers, will not work if they don't have a bond between ground and neutral legs in the circuit. And this protects you and allows the breaker to trip in the event of a fault. You can easily pick one of these up on Amazon for $10 to $15. I'll leave a link in the description below for the one I'm using in this test. Now this EV charging generator from Max Heating Rods actually comes with a ground neutral bond plug in the kit, although it's not labeled as such, so you might not know that's what it does. I tested multiple EV chargers with and without these plugs. They all work with the plug and none of them work without the plug. That confirmation out of the way, I set out to charge a vehicle one cold winter morning with an off-the-shelf 110 volt portable charger. I plugged it in and started the generator. Success! Or so I thought. The vehicle recognized the power source and said it was charging, but the battery was actually losing power. What's going on? After some investigation, I realized the battery warming circuit was consuming more power than the charger was putting into the vehicle. And that was resulting in a net loss. That is why I test things myself. Well, I thought what I clearly need is a better charger. The charger I was using was only pulling 8 amps, around 1,000 watts, and that just wasn't enough. The generator is capable of 3,200 watts, so I just needed a charger that could actually make use of the power it's able to put out. A quick search on the internet turned up this very nice, reasonably priced portable shell charger. I contacted EVgo and they were very happy to send me this one to use for our testing activity. You can purchase the unit with or without the 110 adapter plug. I needed the one with since I'm using the generator and that's the thing I want to test. I also got several other plugs and adapters to allow me to connect it to the 240 on my house or another 240 volt generator or the 30 amp plug on the 110 generator. No matter what you need to connect to, there's a plug out there that will get you to where you need to go. The reason I picked this charger is it can work on 110 or 240 volt sources. It's portable, it has a really nice case. I can just throw it in the back of the car and always have it with me in case I need to charge in an unusual location. Plus, I need to be able to control the amount of current that the vehicle is drawing, and this one allows me to set 12, 16, 24, 32, or 40 amp charge current limits. I'm actually really impressed with the quality of these cables and the build of this charger. I'll leave a link in the description below in case you want to get one of these. So for test 2, I borrowed my friend's Nissan Leaf and started at a very low state of charge. The meter showed 19 miles of range remaining when I started the test. All right, I'm going to weigh out exactly 500 grams of unleaded gasoline for this test, so I know precisely how much energy we're going to put into the vehicle through the generator. Whoa, exactly 500 grams. All right, we've got half a kilogram of gas. Let's run the test. I've run this completely out of fuel. I know this is not a certified container for fuel. You don't have to let me know in the comments. It's just a convenient way to measure it. Of course you can if you want to. All right, we're filled up. Let's get charging. All right, to get started, I'll put the ground neutral bonding plug that the generator comes with in the 30 amp outlet. And then I'll use the 110 adapter on this unit. It allows me to switch from 240 to 110. The generator started right up. This one doesn't have an electric start, but it's really easy to start with the pull start. And I connected my more powerful shell charger into the inverter and plugged it into the car. Right away, I'm getting much more power than before, almost double, pulling about 15 to 16 amps and giving me about 1800 watts, as I can see reading out on the generator and on the shell charger itself. And that's great, but I want to charge even faster. This has a 30 amp plug, and I'd like to get as close as possible to the 3200 watt output so I can charge the vehicle as quickly as possible. So I tried to adjust the settings on the shell charger to boost it up to 24 amps, but it wouldn't change. I could only select 12 amps or 16 amps. Then I realized this unit is probably programmed to limit the charge current to 16 amps when plugged into a 120 volt outlet. It has no way of knowing I have a 30 amp plug to work with. I hate it when I'm being protected from myself. But I can understand why they would want to program it that way. The average person might not understand the limit of the outlet that they're plugging into and could set the current to a 40 amp current, for instance, and plug it into a 110, 15 amp outlet and dramatically overload it. But that doesn't help me in my situation. Just to confirm, I used the adapter for the 30 amp outlet and plugged it in, and I was still limited to 16 amps. Not to worry, I thought. I pulled out my 240 volt generator and plugged in the ground neutral bond plug and connected the EV charger. Sure enough, I was able to select 40 amps on the charger. Everything looked good to go. I plugged the charger into the car, and for some reason, the car would not recognize the power input. Now, my 240 volt generator is not a pure sine wave generator, and apparently the Leaf does not like that dirty power and refuses to charge with it. Now, I understand that not all EVs require a pure sine wave generator, but how would you know whether yours requires it or not? It's not something that's stated in the manual. So just to be safe, if you want to be prepared, it's probably a good idea to use a pure sine wave generator as your backup source of power for charging an EV. In addition to that, pure sine wave generators are good for operating microwaves and sensitive electronics. There are a whole host of reasons why it's better to have an inverter generator. Just to confirm, I plugged the charger into a 240 volt outlet in my house. I was able to set it up to 40 amps. Even though the Leaf won't pull 40 amps, it would charge at the 240 volt higher current levels with the house power, which is pure sine wave. For one more data point, I pulled out my Max Peating Rod's dual fuel pure sine wave generator. I connected a tank of propane and installed the bonding plug and the charger. It also worked just fine with a 16 amp max charge rate. So with all those parameters and limitations, I completed the test in multiple rounds of 500 to 1,000 grams of fuel at a time. And then to confirm, I drove it to get the actual miles I was able to drive instead of just relying on the meter to tell me the change in range. And it turns out they weren't the same. So let's look at the compiled results in the summary chart. I've compiled all the relevant results here into one chart so we can go through them quickly, starting with the amount of fuel that I used for the whole test, which was 2,500 grams, and that is almost a gallon of gasoline for those of us in the US. The generator ran for 128 minutes, which is just shy of 2 hours, and produced 3,784 watt hours or 3.78 kilowatt hours. And that is an estimate based on my charging of batteries using multiple runs of the generator. Now, in the vehicle, the range indicator showed that we added 20 miles of range, but after driving the car, I know that we only actually added 11.8 miles of range. Once we charged it all the way up, I drove it until it was back to the original charge state that I started with, and that was only 11.8 miles. So using that 11.8 miles, we're basically charging at a rate of 5.5 miles per hour of charge. And if I calculate out the fuel economy from that, it would be about 13.4 miles per gallon of gasoline burned that we're able to travel. That's not terribly efficient, but this is not a great way to utilize gasoline. Running it from a generator through an inverter and then through that to an inverter to go back to DC, it's pretty inefficient. By computation, that would give us 0.32 kilowatt hours per mile, which coincidentally is really close to the rated kilowatt hours per mile for this particular Leaf. Just for a visual, I've plotted both the actual and the predicted range from the vehicle. This blue line shows the range that was being predicted as the generator was running. I've got the miles across the bottom and the amount of time the generator was running along the left. So it ran 128 minutes and predicted we would be able to drive about 20 miles. But my actual was 11.8, and that's how I show the 60-minute time at 5.5 miles of range. So this orange curve is our actual, and this blue curve is the car's predicted range. They're pretty far apart, and maybe that's because the car is old, or maybe it just doesn't have a very good calculator, but I was kind of surprised it was that poor. But that's why I checked the actual miles driven and didn't rely on the meter to tell me how much power we were putting in the car. Now for my new handy dandy calculator. I pretty much use a calculator for everything I'm trying to decide in life, so I didn't make this just for YouTube. This is what I would typically do for decision making. Yeah, I know. You can laugh at me in the comments. At first, I was just going to make a simple calculator to determine what was cheaper, to drive by electric or drive by gas, and then I got involved in lots of other details. So I'll just go through how it operates, and you can download it and use it for free. I'll attach it in the description below, and I'll put a link to it on my website. The top half of this calculator is for US standard conversions. And then if you live in the part of the world that uses the more logical measurement system, the metric system, you can use the bottom half. For the purposes of illustration, we'll just use the top. So I'm just going to zoom in on the top here to make it a little bit easier to see. All right, the way this works is everything in yellow is something you can input. Now, you don't have to input all of them. For instance, this area over here is just a conversion calculator, and I'll go over that in a second. But on the left, I have the gasoline or diesel-powered version of the vehicle you're trying to compare, and on the right, your battery electric vehicle. And the first couple things we're going to put in is how much you're paying for gasoline. Now, the price of gasoline just went up around here to about $3.75, so I can type in that number, and everything will update. And the vehicle I'm comparing to, in my case, will be about 35 miles to the gallon is what it typically gets. And I'll say that I'm driving 15,000 miles a year. So I put those components in, and the first thing it's going to calculate here is the average cost per mile, and that's about 10 cents. Now I can jump over here. I'm paying 14 cents per kilowatt hour, but if I'm running on solar, that's closer to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So let's plug that in, 0.07, my 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And this is the average kilowatt hours per mile. So the typical range for a vehicle is somewhere between 0.24 kilowatt hours to 0.87. And you might be like, well, I don't know what my car is. Well, don't worry. I included a list of all of the currently available electric vehicles here on tab 2, and you can just look up your vehicle. I've got the Tesla here, all the vehicles, and they're in order by the most fuel efficient to the least. And I got this from ecocostsavings.com, so you can go to their website directly if you want to see the details that they posted there, but I just copied it in here for your reference. So you can highlight this column and hit Control F and just search for your car, and there is a 2013 Nissan Leaf at 0.29, a 2017 at 0.3, 2014 at 0.3. So whatever you need to find, it's probably in the list. If perhaps you have your own number, you already know based on the meter on your particular electric vehicle, maybe it's in watt hours per mile. So you can type that in here, 320 watt hours per mile, and it'll convert it to 0.32, which is the kilowatt hours per mile, which is what needs to be entered in this field. Maybe you have kilowatt hours per 100 miles. So you could put that in and it'll give you kilowatt hours per mile. If you have miles per kilowatt hour, you can put that number in, it'll convert it for you. Maybe you have MPGE, which is a mile per gallon of gasoline equivalent. Now, I'm not a real big fan of that metric, but maybe that's what you have. And then I also have a calculator on the bottom here. If you put in your kilowatt hours per mile, it'll tell you what the MPGE is, just for reference. That's not needed in this tool. So once you have your average kilowatt hours per mile for your vehicle, you put that number in here. For this vehicle, based on our testing, it's 0.32. And then this next one is charge efficiency. Now I've attached an article at the bottom here you can reference, which goes through several different vehicles and the average charge efficiency. And what you'll typically find is it's about 85%. So you can just leave it at that if you're not sure. If you know what your vehicle is, you can put that in. But here's the reality. You have to produce a lot more power at your house than you actually end up putting into the battery. It's about a 15% loss of the power you pay for versus what actually ends up in the battery. I know it's disappointing, but it's reality. So based on these numbers I've entered here, the average cost per mile for my EV is 2 cents, which is dramatically cheaper than the gasoline counterpart. Now, if you live in one of those dystopian locations that has $1 per kilowatt hour electricity at some peak time, and that's when you have to charge, then, that's going to make a huge difference. Now you're paying 37 cents per mile. And then I have these cells here to automatically change color so you can see which one is the better deal, the gas side or the electric side. And right away you see, oh, that's a really big problem. I better go with my $3.75 a gallon gasoline over my $1 per kilowatt hour electric rate. But that's not what I have, so we'll put back to 14 cents here. So based on that, you can see if I drive for 15,000 miles at these parameters, it's going to cost me about $1,600 a year for gasoline power and about $791 a year to drive electric. But that's not all we have to consider. What about insurance and maintenance? I suggest you get some rates from your insurance company. Typically, you're going to pay a little bit more for the electric vehicle for a couple of reasons. One, the cost of repair is a little higher, and two, typically the electric vehicle is going to be a more expensive car than the gas-powered counterpart. Then this yearly maintenance cost, I also got that from an article I linked below. I don't know if I believe that number, but you can look up your records and see what you're currently paying for your gas car. One thing to consider for electric is the tires are consumed way faster. Some people say they're getting somewhere around 10,000 miles instead of 40 to 50,000 miles on a set of tires. So maybe your maintenance costs on an electric car will be more. If you're like me and you do all of your gas maintenance yourself, you do all of your oil changes and everything yourself, the gas maintenance cost won't be anywhere near $2,000 a year. So anyway, enter your maintenance cost. Registration might be more expensive for electric vehicles. Some states are charging you per mile that you drive if you drive an electric car, or some extra registration fee to cover the road maintenance since you're not paying the gasoline tax. So you may have a higher registration fee. So then you have the cost of money. Whether you're buying a car outright or you're getting a loan for a car, the value of that car, if you put that in an investment, it could be earning some interest. So if my car is worth $25,000 and I could have that money in a money market right now earning 5%, then I would have $1,250 a year in interest I could be earning if I didn't have a car. Or say you're getting a loan for that car and maybe your loan is 7%. Well, then it's costing you $1,700 a year in interest because you've leveraged that fund. So even if you're not getting a loan or you already own the car, enter the value of the car, because if you were to sell it, you could get that money back. So I'll put that back to 5% because, I would pay cash for a car and I could have that money in a money market. So that cost me $1,250 a year. And I'm going to say it's going to cost about $10,000 more for an equivalent car in electric. So it costs a little bit more in time value of money for the electric version. So those yearly ownership costs for the gas-powered car in this scenario is slightly more expensive than the electric. And then if we add all of those together, you get the total cost. And for this, I get $5,552 for the gas and $4,681 for the electric. So the recommendation here is to go EV. I'm going to save $871 a year. Now, you'll see that it doesn't take much to make a huge difference with this calculator. Say, for instance, the administration changes and gas goes back to $2.50 a gallon, and your electric rates are actually maybe 25 cents. Well, that changes the scenario completely.
Now, the recommendation is to go with gas because you're going to lose $285 a year going with electric. Another thing to consider is the amount of miles you drive per year. So if you drive a lot of miles, it's going to change the calculation pretty dramatically because the cost per mile is suddenly a much bigger factor. You can also use it to kind of give you an idea of a threshold. You know, if gas prices go over a certain amount, it's suddenly going to be worthwhile for me. So you could just bump in some different numbers here until you get not $30 a gallon. They're at $3.25. It's almost exactly even. So if I'm driving 30,000 miles a year and my electric rates are 25 cents per kilowatt hour, gas would need to be at least $3.25 a gallon in order for this scenario to make sense. And at that point, I'm just breaking even. In order for me to deal with all the inconvenience that comes with an electric vehicle, it's going to have to save me quite a bit before I can justify shifting over to it. Hopefully that makes sense, and that's a fun tool that you can use to try and decide what makes the most sense for you. And if you find any problems in the calculations, just let me know in the description below, and I'll make the corrections and upload the new calculator. All of my calculators that I have made so far have been free. You can get them on my website. You do not have to request access to use the calculator. All you have to do is download it, and then you can open it in your own version of Excel and make any changes you want to.
Obviously, that doesn't cover every aspect of EV ownership, so feel free to add your pros and cons based on your actual experience in the comments below. As usual, I'll include any discounts I can offer in the description below as well. I believe this new generator is currently out of stock and might not be back in stock until July. But you can get a similar unit that's on sale right now for less than $500. That's a pretty good deal for some emergency backup power. And the dual fuel version that I also tested in this video is less than $650. And personally, I think it's worth it for the little bit of extra money to have the dual fuel option. I mean, if you're in an emergency situation, the ability to choose between two different fuels is super valuable. If you want to see if solar makes sense for you, I also made a calculator for that, and you can find it on my website, projectswithdave.com. It's completely free to use, and you can download it and modify it however you like. If you have any issues or questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.